Committee on Finance, and I turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next meeting is the Committee on Capital Planning, Execution, and Asset Management, which will be chaired by our Vice Chair, Jeff Linford. Vice Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today's meeting of the Committee on Capital Planning, Execution, and Asset Management is being held in public session in its entirety. At this point, I ask the Secretary to advise those present of the composition of the committee and any commissioner recusals on the item before the committee.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Committee on Capital Planning, Execution, and Asset Management is composed of Commissioner Linford, the committee chair, Commissioner O'Toole, the committee vice chair, and Commissioners LaBarbera and Rosado. All committee members are present today. In addition, also present are Commissioners Bulwedge, Eve, Helmy, Horowitz, Kelly, McCabe, and Richardson. Commissioners McCabe and Rosado participating remotely. There are no requests for action today and no recusals required.
I call on our Chief Development Officer, Derek Utter, to present the capital performance results for the first quarter of 2023. Good to see you, Derek.
All right, thank you, Vice Chairman. Good afternoon, Commissioners. So I'm here to report today on the first quarter of 2023 capital plan results. You'll see on the slide that we spent $402 million, which is 72% of our budget, so a little bit lower than in past quarters. In fact, about 20% below the first quarter of 2022. I'll go into some of the reasons for that in a moment. We also met 81% of our planned schedule milestones, and I'll talk about some of the issues that we're seeing in the markets as well. So giving a little more of a historical perspective, you see we typically have spent about 80 to 90% of our plan. In the first quarter, we spent 72% of our plan. The reason we measure this, again, is we want to ensure that we're executing on our projects. We're deploying capital. We're getting things done. And so this is a key measure for us. We have two basic reasons for why we spent a little lower than planned. One is, as we've discussed many times before, our JFK redevelopment program, the major work, is just now ramping up. And so we have just a slight delay, and the timing of that means that we underspent in the first quarter. Also, one of the milestone payments for LaGuardia Terminal C, which Delta is leading the construction on, was achieved earlier than planned, and so that payment was made in December. So the payment was actually made in December instead of January, and therefore we're a little bit lower in our spending in the first quarter of this year. In terms of milestones, we hit 17 of our 21 planned milestone dates. You may recall we measure every project at 2 points. When we start construction, so the end of the pre-construction period, we have a milestone. And then when we complete construction, so we want to measure our wind up to getting to construction and then getting construction done on time. So there were 6 future milestones achieved ahead of schedule in addition to those that were achieved on time. Of the 4 that we missed, 2 of them related to what I'll call COVID supply chain issues, where products that were needed during construction weren't able to get to the site on time. And of the other 2, one of them related to bids coming in higher than expected, and so we decided to pull the project and repackage it so we had the right scope defined for our future bidding. In terms of projects that were completed, we oftentimes talk about projects put into beneficial use. This is a little small to read from the audience, but you'll see there are about 8 projects put into beneficial use, including the rehabilitation of the runway deck components at LaGuardia Airport, the path tunnel emergency ventilation fan renovation, the replacement of radio dispatch consoles at EWR Airport and at the Holland Tunnel, and the priority leak mitigation at the bus terminal. These are all stated good repair projects that are important to maintain our assets in good working order. So with that, I will be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Derek. Do any commissioners have any comments regarding the report? Today, this concludes the meeting of the Committee on Capital Planning, Execution, and Asset Management. I now turn it back to our chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Okay, good afternoon.